Yeah, so my original background is HPC, high performance computing area. So I was a researcher at Argonne National Laboratory, and they have a supercomputer called Blue Gene, which has 1,000,000 CPU cores.
Okay.
So I was a part of a team to handle the data there. They generate like a lot of data, obviously, but it's also a limited environment. Only DOE can buy, Department of Energy.
Right.
So 7 or 8 years ago, I got naturally interested in another system called Hadoop, which is a data processing framework, as you know. And it didn't work on my laptop. So I started working on some patches and started organizing the community in Japan.
Right.
So it was like 5, 10 nerd people, but now we have around 2,000, 3,000 members on it.
Right.
And during that explosion, I was fortunate enough to be a founder of that community and talking with hundreds of developers managing the data, not only from social, mobile, internet, but they collect the data from like automotives, buildings, and lights, and everything is now generating data, right?
Hadoop just kind of took over like very quickly, like everywhere, all around the world.
Right? And but they have a lot of problem, like especially like data volume and also like a data source diversity is just exploding.
Right.
But the people who can build and maintain the system is just not increasing.
Right.
So that's why I see the talent gap. So we started this company just to fill in that gap. So that's why we started.
Yeah,
so how we do this is just running the cloud service for data analytics, so that people can just instantly start analyzing the data.
So did you guys meet through the community that you were like founder of in Japan?
So I met Hiro at the Hadoop conference Japan. So Hiro was a VC here, and he was originally from Red Hat and working on some of the open source deals. And he met like 4 people, 1 intern startup called Cloudera.
All right.
And he also wanted to introduce Hadoop to the Asia region. So obviously he come from Japan, so he found me because I'm a founder of Hadoop community in Japan. So we started working together with one of the Cloudera founder, Christos Biglia, and we met and together, and I feel like, so the reason why I come here is I was the CTO in the previous company from the age of 20 to 26. So I was helping the company founded by like a university colleague, and it was okay. It was like 5 people to like 35 people, 6 to 7 million in revenue. But during that period, the Cloudera took off from 5 people to 500 people. So I saw this curve, and I feel like, okay, well, it's okay to be in Japan, but something different here in Silicon Valley. So that's why I decided to come here.
So you guys, did you know from the start that you wanted to do this here, and you were gonna like, did you create the company directly in Silicon Valley, or did you go through a phase of working in Japan?
We directly founded the company in Silicon Valley. Yeah.
And it's funny because I see a lot of entrepreneurs kind of, it used to be the model would be like, oh, I'm going to start it like in my country first, and then like I'll move to Silicon Valley, and that didn't really work very, very well. But now I see a lot of companies kind of just go directly, like let's incorporate in the US, let's do the paperwork correctly, and let's kind of make it, break it directly from Silicon Valley. So you started from like very small, you were saying just like one small room, and now, it's been like a few years later. I mean, how long has it been? It's been like 6 years, something like that?
It's almost like
5 years?
4 years and a half.
Yeah, okay.
Well, around like 100 people.
Yeah, and now it's like big office, and it's like you still need to fill it in, but it's kind of a big transition. So what was kind of, it seemed like a big decision. You seemed like you were convinced of it. What were you afraid of? I guess in terms of in your mind, right? About like starting a company in Silicon Valley compared to what you were doing before.
You know what? Because I started working at startup from the age of 20, I actually don't afraid, and I was always excited.
Was there something you should have been afraid of?
Maybe, yeah. The time is the only risk, right? And investors are so friendly for entrepreneurs here in terms of conditions and terms. And really, but I know that SaaS business model where we are playing is more like a long-term play. So I know I need to commit next 7 to 10 years just to build the business. But I was ready, so I was convinced to spend next 10 years with this one thing.
So what were some of the things that maybe that happened that surprised you, or maybe some of the ways that this ended up being different than previous companies you were trying to do in Japan?
Yeah, So I feel like the first one, the investor ecosystem here, is pretty much new. So I was surprised like how much influence investors has in this area.
Right.
Well, I didn't take any money in the previous company, so that's so much different. And also the working culture is also pretty much different. So Japanese like working all the time, like come to 10 and then go back to like 5 p.m. But it's like there's a lot of freedom here. But also you're gonna need to show the result, and that's it, right? So that's pretty much
different set of controls, right? Yeah. And then it's interesting what you're saying about the investor influence. I'd like to understand a bit better. Do you mean by that they control, like, I guess, they have more control individually on companies or on trends, or they're more a fabric of startups? Like, what do you mean by
I think it's almost like an ecosystem where, so I met like a Bill Tai, Jerry Yang, and Scale Ventures, and then some of the other VCs. They all were ex-entrepreneurs often. So let's say like Jerry Yang founded Yahoo. There's so much VPs and director there, started a new company, and Jerry Yang is just fun because he just do it and then wants to like cultivate the next innovation, right? While in Japan, there's no tech person who actually became like, let's say like a billionaires and others. And there's almost like a bankers and others. And then I think Silicon Valley, you have like a continuous cycle of like a success. And people have that kind of culture.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I've heard kind of similar stories from many different countries where like a lot of the VCs you can find, or investors in general you can find in Europe or in other places in Asia, are like people who made their money elsewhere or behave much more like a bank, even if they're kind of familiar with tech. And then of course you have a lot less options too, and I would guess that's the same in Japan, right? In terms of how many people you can go and get money from and the terms that you get. And you mentioned that, right? It's like it's much more startup friendly and entrepreneur friendly here. So what are some of the advice you would give? It seemed like you seem like you're doing well. It seems like you're not really kind of afraid of doing the move. What advice would you give to people right now that are like entrepreneurs in Japan or somewhere else, or just have an idea in their head?
So our first angel investor called Bill Tai just said to me like, so it's pretty hard to establish the company here as a foreign entrepreneurs because you obviously don't have much network first, and I couldn't speak any English like 5 years ago. So when I pitched to Bill Tai, I couldn't listen. He said, "Oh, I will invest." Looks like meeting went well. I asked Hiro, "Okay, is the meeting went well?" And "Oh, you missed that." So yeah, he will invest, right? But that's being said, Bill Tai told me, think of you as someone come from Estonia and then founded the company in Japan. Do you want to join as a Japanese to that company? And I probably hesitated. And like in a similar situation, like someone come from Japan, you don't have any background here and network, come here. Does everyone want to join this company? And maybe not. So think of you have like a huge gap and wall compared to what you want to be, but you gotta need to overcome.
Right, but conversely, wouldn't you say that it's even less likely that an investor would invest in a Japanese founder who's like doing the entire company in Japan, as opposed to the same Japanese founder trying to like organize in Silicon Valley and move there, right? It does seem like there's a bias for whatever reason towards investing in company and people that are here, even if they don't have a great network.
Yeah, that's true. I think once especially with the language difference, so it's like my previous company, but they established the entity in Japan first and try to go abroad. But because of like some language issues, all the wiki, for example, is written in Japanese. So if someone from like US wants to join, but all the information is written in Japanese, for example. But we built the company from scratch to be really the international company. So that's pretty different.
Right. Doesn't that help you though sometimes? I'm thinking in particular, like I had friends that were doing, Docker, like .cloud in the early days. And there was a big kind of French connection because a lot of the founders were French, and they got access to a lot of talent, that wasn't necessarily very comfortable with language or wanted to work with fellow French people or knew them. And so they really were able, it seems to me, to leverage their local network and their advantage, right, in other ways. Did that help you? Or
I don't know much about the French network, but obviously there's less Japanese people here compared to like other region, and you don't see many Japanese here.
Right.
You may know. But we have also, so this is behind from others, but it's also a benefit because we have benefit of hiring the engineer in Japan.
Right.
And they're all talented, and they're looking for, like, they're all working with the company who is building the business for domestic business.
Right.
But we can give them an opportunity
Right.
to just go international.
Yeah.
Right?
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah. That was exactly the same for us at RAM. We had a big kind of Danish component, and being able to have an office in Denmark, hire a lot of local talent, and have them be super excited to work for a Silicon Valley company or a company that was partly in Silicon Valley.
Like everywhere, right?
Yeah. So you got to play that advantage. It's like everything else, right? Where you come from, I think that can work against you in some ways and with some people, and you can also turn it to your advantage. I think in some very concrete ways by leveraging investors that come from a similar background, by focusing on the hiring, by having a satellite office in those markets. And then I would imagine also for sales, I know you're very active a lot in APAC, and so I assume that you would have an advantage as well in terms of like being a big data vendor and understanding kind of the local market, the local players and everything else.
That's true.
Yeah, so that's been kind of nice. So any other words of advice or caution you would give to people, or you just get started, I guess?
Just get started. I also feel like Silicon Valley, I think it's perceived as more like a heaven in the engineering team.
Yeah.
But from my mind, the access to the top talent for sales and marketing is more valuable because people who made a success at, let's say, like a New Relic or like any other, like Box or like Salesforce, all these like successful company actually grow the sales and marketing talent. No one can access except in this area. So that's why I think the decision of coming here and hiring sales and marketing talent here was the best decision ever.
Makes complete sense. So let's talk about kind of more about opportunities for startups. One thing that seems striking in a lot of these, machine learning, deep learning type of conversation is the advantage of having a large data set. And you look at Google and Baidu and Facebook and all those people that have large quantities of data, personal data, and they're able to very quickly train their neural nets and deliver great results.
I just want to interrupt you. I hear this so much, and it drives me crazy because it's just not true.